Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning for this announcement about the actions that the City of Newark and other legislators are taking against the owners and management of Garden Spires. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge all of the elected officials that we have with us this morning. Of course, we have the Honorable Mayor Ras J. Baraka. We have Congressman Donald Payne, Governor Dick Cody, Senator Ron Rice, Senator Teresa Ruiz, Assemblyman Ralph Caputo, Assemblywoman Eliana Pintor, Assemblyman Gimblin, Assemblywoman Cleopatra Tucker, Director Phil Scott, Assemblywoman Blondie Watson, and other members of our staff. To begin, we'd like to bring up the Honorable Mayor Ras Baraka.
Thank you. I just want to first thank all of the other elected officials that are here in support of what we're doing today. I appreciate it, and the Congressman, I saw him somewhere. Oh, there he is behind us as well. Congressman Payne is with us as well. So I just want to start by saying this is not our first time here. We've been here several times. A complete inspection occurred last on June 30th, 2017 by code enforcement, fire, health, and UCC inspectors who found a number of 379 violations, and that's without gaining access to all of the units. Code Health and Fire were unable to gain access to about 109 of those units, and we're not sure if they were occupied or not. The owner and operator is scheduled to appear on July 21st in Newark Municipal Court regarding creating unsafe conditions and creating a public nuisance. The city currently has an additional 591 open violations pending in Newark Municipal Court on July 27th, 2017. Resulting from a complete inspection between February and June of 2017, which were not abated as required. The property was originally scheduled to be sold in March of 2017, which did not occur. It has been determined that the property is unfit for human habitation. The excessive neglect is dangerous to health and will continuously cause sickness and extremely stressful conditions to the occupants. Obviously, there are probably some apartments where the residents do their best to keep them as clean and neat and as possible. But there are some structural issues in this building found by fire, found by code enforcement, that cannot just be band-aided over, cannot just be plastered over. It needs to be fixed. There was one apartment, we went in and the sink was down. They took a 2x4 and stuck it under the sink to hold it up. There's an apartment that I went in with a hole that we saw that was at least 1 feet to 2 feet in size, with water coming down the back of it. We filed two C complaints, which are criminal complaints against the owner. We say within the jurisdiction of this court, due to the owner's agent and operator did neglect the conditions of the aforementioned property, address regarding the well-being of the residents. After numerous inspections by code enforcement, fire, health, and engineering inspections, it has been determined by the public officer of the City of Newark that the property has been determined unfit for the human habitation, rat-infested, unsanitary stairwells, evidence of urine and human feces, poor and inadequate ventilation, creating sewer mold in units, defective toilets, sinks, vacant units filled with discarded trash, garbage, missing radiators, animals, in empty apartments, deteriorated standpipes, damaged window guards, excessive garbage, bulk, visual, and active illegal drug activity, which promotes a dangerous to health or life and is likely the cause of sickness among the occupants, which creates a public nuisance. That's a 2C violation and a criminal violation. And then Friday, the city also went further and went to court for an order to show cause against this property here. The lawsuit that we put in there seeks the appointment of a receiver and a court order declaring the buildings uninhabitable, as well as the evacuation and relocation of the tenants at the expense of the landlords, First King Properties. Specifically, this action seeks relief on behalf of the city in connection with the numerous documented housing violations by the landlord and the landlord's failure to maintain the property in a living condition. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development is also named in the complaint, as it appears that the property owners are inappropriately collecting financial contributions from HUD for apartments that are either uninhabitable and or vacant. So we are no longer, as a city, going to sit by and constantly come and find these people over and over and over again and bring them to court, and there is no redress for our grievance, no redress for the grievances of the occupants of this property. We are demanding that the landlord and owner either A, fix all of these things in a very timely fashion, or move these people out at their expense, and HUD should be a party in that process to make sure that these conditions do no longer exist here, and they should not be paying taxpayers' money for people to live in buildings that we believe are uninhabitable, or units that are not, in fact, habitated at all. So, Congressman Payne.
Yes, okay, sorry.
Good morning. To Newark residents, as I believe you're aware, like my father before me, I've had a long and staunch supporter of HUD and its goal to provide affordable, decent, safe, and sanitary housing for Americans, specifically including lower-income Newark families. Most recently, I've been a sharp and vocal opponent of the Trump administration's proposed draconian cuts to HUD's budget. But there is an obligation here of the federal government. We need more affordable housing and decent housing, not less. Accordingly, I stand here before you today, severely distressed and extremely disappointed, and more than a bit angry. You see, as a child of this community, I had friends that lived here for decades ago. And you came here and it was a place that was nice, it was pristine, it was people taking care of the apartments, the property was well maintained. For it to fall into disrepair is criminal. People should not have to live in the circumstances that the mayor just described. And to my part, I promise to be more vigilant in terms of what is happening here with HUD. It is their responsibility to know what the condition is of the apartments in which they provide vouchers for, and to not have any idea or raise these issues before the city says to me that they're dropping the ball. So it's my duty to make sure that they don't drop the ball, that they keep their eyes on the circumstances and the conditions of all residents that benefit from the taxpayers' assistance in housing. And so to that point, I stand here with the mayor and the other elected officials that are here to say that this is unacceptable. This will not remain in this condition, because whatever needs to be done, I am lockstep with the mayor and the other elected officials on making sure that all people have decent, livable, affordable housing. No one should have to live in these circumstances. Thank you. Who's next?
I want to acknowledge we've also been joined by the Honorable Sheila Oliver, as well as our interim Corporation Counsel, Kenyatta Stewart. Next, we're going to hear from Senator Ronald Rice, followed by Governor Dick Cody, and then Senator Teresa Ruiz.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm happy to be here, and I'm not happy to be here because I've been in Newark since 1955, 16 years on the Newark Municipal Council, 4 years as deputy mayor, and I've constantly spent time in this building with all these problems. They don't get better, they get worse. In fact, I'm the senator who passed the window guard legislation because this is the building where we had a tragedy. And so when you start to look at what's taking place, not just here at Academy of Spires, this is something that is impacting the whole state of New Jersey, particularly in our urban communities. And that's why Senator Beck and I sponsored Senate Bill 3270, on which established the safe, sanitary, subsidized rental bill of rights. We met last week with HUD and HMFA. We have toured with some of my colleagues here, several buildings in Newark. We've toured several buildings in Asbury Park to see the reflection. It is a shame. Some of the buildings we went in, every family that had kids had asthmatic conditions. There are some health issues associated with these conditions. One little girl actually took a rat and put it on her cell phone because it's like her little pet thing. They don't know the difference, Mayor. I want to commend you on all the problems that you inherited and the terrific job you're doing on trying to fix them, but you need our help too. And that's why it's important for my colleagues back here to help us move this legislation through the legislature. It is also important for those of us in state government and those of us in local government to collectively talk to the governor candidates, because somebody's going to be our new governor in January, to let them know right now that this is a priority to us to fix. What Senate Bill 3270 attempts to do is to get accountability. The one thing that was brought out during our meetings, and Senator Beck kind of pushed this because all the years I've worked on it, the one thing we never put a lot of emphasis on was subsidies. And when the question was raised to HUD and others as to why they continue to pay these landlords who have these slum properties, the excuse was, we're afraid if we don't pay them, they'll put the tenant out. Well, that's not even true. We deal with apartments every day where people put rent into some type of escrowed account. What HUD should be doing and what HMFA should be doing, if we are funding, then we should be escrowing these money. And I think the mayor's right by filing the suit and asking for a receivership. We should use those dollars to abate these conditions in here if we have to get our own contractors. At the same time, put a lien on the bill to make those landlords pay us back. One of the problems that we have in New Jersey and other cities in urban America is they continue to flip these properties. These properties go from family member to family members, and every time you catch up with them, I remember when I was on council, it's a new owner, usually it's a cousin or someone else. Come out of Brooklyn, Lakewood, and some of those other areas. There are LLCs where we can't even identify really who the real owners are of the buildings because they're LLCs. This bill attempts to fix that and deal with some other issues. So I'm with you, Mayor, and I'm glad to be here this morning, even though I have to run to an event. I wanted to be here because there are some of us at the state level that's very serious about this. And we're not letting the politics of everybody else in these elections get in the way when we have these kids sick in these buildings. I have a video here that we took at one place where the lady, when she cut her water on, the sprocket shoots off like a bullet. And if it hit those babies in that tub, it's going to be like shrapnel. And then the water flow. You have about 19 buildings or something close to it owned by one owner. HUD acknowledged when we spoke to them last week that this owner is problematic. Then the question is, how come you're not inspecting and dealing with 19 buildings if you know that? And so we have asked HUD to make sure in the state to put together a list and identify these owners and go after everything they own, inspect everything they own. So I'm here in support of this mayor and the work he's doing. I'm in support of my colleagues, next to my colleagues to stand behind those of us who are pushing 3270. I know Senator Cody and I have a bill that I'm sponsoring with him. I know Senator Ruiz has put some additional legislation in, and we're going to bring it all together and find out what makes the most sense to give us the best bang in legislation to start to resolve these problems. This must be a priority to all of us who represent you, and I'm glad to be back here, but I'm sorry to be back under these conditions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Rice. You know, to have affordable, quality housing is not a privilege, it's a right. It's a right. And what's happening in here is not all right. And Mayor, I understand that the people who own this company, it's called First King. I'm sure they live like kings in suburbia, while people down here have to do this, live here. That's wrong. A year and a half ago, the mayor and myself went into a huge house, rooming house. It was, I think it was minus 10 below. They had no heat, no water, no lights, and we're paying $500 a month. I mean, how outrageous is that? And to the mayor's credit and to the city, within 2 hours, the place was boarded up and those people had true housing and a place to get a shower, get a meal, and everything else. So thank you, Mayor, for bringing this to the public's attention. And to the landlords, let's say this: get the hell out. Who's next? Senator Ruiz.
Thank you, Governor Cody. First, I want to commend our great mayor, the City of Newark, and his administration and Corporation Council for taking the next step. There is pervasive abuse that's happening here in the City of Newark, and it's happening on behalf of landlords who don't live here, who don't take care of the people who are renting from them. For our congressmen and those on the federal level, HUD has a level of bureaucracy that is far removed from what is critically needed in our neighborhoods. Project-based vouchers tend to work on behalf of landlords and not on behalf of our families. Let these families take their vouchers and select safe, respectful places for them to raise their families and their children. We have children who live here. We have seniors who live here. We have human beings who live here in deplorable conditions. Someone asked me, well, what do you think should happen to these landlords? I said, you know what? Jail's not good enough. They should deserve to be forced to live in one of their apartments for a year so that they can recognize what they've been doing to the residents of the City of Newark. There's several pieces of legislation that as you heard from one of my colleagues, that are being drafted together. But it is an understatement to say that the bureaucracy is set up for these slumlords to take advantage. You cite them with some failure of one of the occupancies, they appeal. They don't show up to court. They change their LLC name, or they pay a low fine because they can afford to pay. Meanwhile, we have children who at 5:30 in the morning have their bedrooms being invaded by rats. It is disgusting. Again, to Mayor Baraka, to his administration, thank you for taking the next step. But quite frankly, whatever it takes, if it needs for us to put these people's faces in the Star Ledger to say we don't want you here in the City of Newark, whatever it takes. You have the federal government, you have the state, you have local elected officials, and most importantly, the families here who are demanding better. Thank you very much. Not sure who's next. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Ruiz. I just want to, first of all, commend the outstanding work of the Manager of Inspections and Enforcement, Thomas McDonald, and the work that he's done continuously coming here. We have, we're going to hear from a couple of residents now who want to speak on these conditions. If you could come forward, please, and state your name.
Hi, I'm Bonita Collins. I've been here for several years now dealing with these bad conditions. Lately, I've been down to code enforcement, the Board of Health, everything, trying to get help for me and my children because we were forced out of our unit because of the mold that's throughout my entire apartment. So I'm just asking for help so I'll be able to live either in my apartment or in another residence. Me and my small children that were forced to move out of our apartment because of the conditions. So I'm just asking for help. You know, please help me and my children be able to have an apartment where we can live in that's decent and safe and, you know, without health hazards. Thank you.
My name is Keisha Williams, and I've lived here for about 5 years. I still have work orders from like 4 years ago. In my bedroom, there's a closet, like a walk-in closet, that I haven't entered in 3 years because they foamed it shut because of all the mice that's coming in. I can't keep food in my cupboard. Like, I have to buy the bins because the rats come right in. Every month, there's a new hole that they come right through. I have a 3-year-old. At first, my 3-year-old had to leave when she was 6 months because they kept climbing into her crib. So she had to go live with her father. I went and I reported it, and no one ever, they kept saying they're coming, no one ever came. If you move my my computer. There's like mold on my wall right there. In my bathroom, there's mold. My husband has tried to like plaster it over, but no one ever comes. No one ever comes. I've never had a paint job. I've never had anything. My kitchen sink has been leaking for 3 years now. I can't keep anything on the floor. Like it just, I have had like 4 floods, and I still have the same apartment. It's just the situation is like really bad. But I mean, I have a low income job, and there's like, you know, there's like nowhere else that I could find that I could pay this amount. But the way how you live, like I've even tried to like the court way, and that never happened. I called court enforcement, nothing. Like the other day, my husband put a trap down, and within maybe about an hour, there were like nine mice on it within an hour. That's how much they come in. Like my kids mostly now can't sleep in their room part because they have to move their bed near where we are because they're afraid. Like it's a lot. And I have a apartment which is right next to the incinerator. So the mice come through the trash hole into my apartment. So basically that's where they basically live, is in my apartment. And their only excuse is that, oh, there's nothing we could do about it. It's a apartment. Well then, you know, move it or do something, or move me or something. But there's nothing that they keep saying there's nothing they could do. So we shop like every week because we can't keep food in our house, or everything has to be in the refrigerator, which is the only place that they won't go. But right now there's like no place in my house that the mice don't come. They're in the drawers, the kids' drawers, they're everywhere.
Thank you, Keisha, for sharing your story. Now we'd like to take questions from the media on this matter. Mayor?
There's a total, Tommy, where's the number at? The number of residents? There are 550 units. 300 of those units are vouchers or Section 8. There's about 100 of those units, 100 or more of those units that are private or market rate as well. The voucher is worth anywhere between $1,200 to $1,800 per unit. So there are a lot of families in this building. Yes. Well, I don't know the total, but up to date. But if you could calculate, there are about 300 families in here at least that receive the Section 8 voucher. The voucher is probably as low as about $1,200. That's probably as cheap as it is to as high as about $1,800. As I know is how much HUD pays, and you could call and verify that, but that's a lot of money per month. We are trying to verify that, but most of the times it is. I don't want to say definitively because we're still running through those LLCs. Yes, both buildings. Both buildings. I can't hear you. No, we haven't done a survey of the residents, which is probably something that we should do. Excuse me, to go back to the other question, this landlord does own another property, Spruce Gardens, on the top of my head. He does own another property in Newark, Spruce Gardens. Yes. Yes, that property also has similar issues. In fact, the sale of the properties was supposed to be this building and the Spruce Garden buildings as well. Yes. So these guys are repeat offenders, serial absentee landlords. No, we haven't heard from them except through court when they show up or not show up in court. And the unfortunate thing is what the young lady was talking about in her apartment when she says they call code enforcement. So code enforcement goes out. The tools that we have is to take these folks to court. Unfortunately, the fines that they have to pay are not as severe or costly as it would be to fix the building up. So they save money in paying the fines and taking us through the bureaucracy of going back and forth to court to get this stuff done. In the meantime, not abating the issues in an adequate way. So we want to take it to another level by going into court and making them to show cause. to speak on that? Want to speak on the case and what do we hope to accomplish?
Good morning, Kenyatta Stewart. So to answer your question, the order to show cause will give us access to the entire building, because you have to understand that a number of the residents aren't here, and we realize that some of these apartments are vacant, but the landlords are still getting money from it. The other thing we want to do is start a receivership, so that the tenants here aren't forced out of the building, and the landlords cannot try to evict them for not having the money from the vouchers. Well, as mentioned, code enforcement has been back and forth to court with them, and that's the municipal court, for a number of violations because of the place is unsanitary. You have to realize that we only have but so much power in municipal court. So if we charge them with things and they have to pay $1,200, $2,500, that's nothing compared to the money that they receive on a monthly basis. They will not change their ways. Even if it goes as high as $5,000, they will not change their ways. They will pay the fines and continue on with their violations. Well, one of the things that we're asking in court is that the landlords are responsible for the relocations of the different families here. We want to make sure that the families here aren't left on the street, and that's why we're going through this process. We know that a judge will give us an opportunity to keep the funds from HUD so that these people can choose where they want to be, and of course, in a better location. Yes, they use the word receivership. It's the same thing, escrow, that's the same idea. Well, you got to understand that this is the first time in this administration. We are in the process of going through the different buildings throughout the city, and we're hearing complaints. We have the mayor has started something called Occupy the Block. So what happens is we have an opportunity to speak to the different residents throughout the city, and of course they tell us about the issues. We actually did an Occupy the Block here 2 weeks ago, Mayor? About 2 weeks ago, where we brought some things to the community, and people were able to come out and talk to us about some of the issues. We had an opportunity to go into the building and see some of the different violations. The different apartments some of them are vacant, full of trash and things of that nature, which is right next door to someone who is living there. Excuse me. Well, of course, we're going through the process now, but the mayor can speak to that now.
So previously, the city had we would go to the building, continue the code enforcement violations, and then work with HUD to try to remove people from the building. The owners usually take us to court and force us to prove why they should, why we should take their building from them, and take us through this process. It's a long and arduous kind of process that makes it difficult for us to have action done in an expedited way. So we flipped it, and we are now going to take them to court in the beginning to prove to us why they should actually have residents in these buildings. So we are contemplating doing that in many other properties around the city based on the outcome and the processes that we're putting in place here. Stratford is the residents have not been back in Stratford. The court ordered that landlord sell their properties, which has not happened yet, but the building is still boarded up. And we moved some residents out of Johnson Avenue property as well, which is also owned by that same owner, who himself owns at least a half a dozen properties in the city of Newark. We have some